Hey you, come here. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Now look at your budget. Now back at me. Back at me. Good. Now look at your budget again. The budget didn't change. You better get used to it. Hello, my name is Rain and welcome to my channel where I discuss fantasy Formula 1. In today's video, we're going to discuss my team for the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. We're going to talk about how my team performed in Bahrain and some miscellaneous stuff in between. So thank you so much for clicking on this video. Now, if you can just click one more button and press like, that would be greatly appreciated. And also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you do not miss the deadline stream this Saturday, 2 hours before the deadline, where I will be finalizing my team. Everything discussed in this video is preliminary. Without further ado, let's actually get into it. So in a week where I did not do what most people did, I am actually quite pleased with the result. So at the deadline stream, or the entirety of last week, I had the conundrum of how to get to the meta team being, of course, Piastri plus McLaren and Mercedes, as well as the best budget drivers according to the budget building tool on F1 Fantasy Tools website, calculating how likely each asset is to rise in price. And to reach that team, I would have had to take in a -20, basically a 2-point hit. And the reason why I didn't feel like doing that, even if it looked like I would outscore the team I had currently, was because so many people would have that team, so I would just lose 20 points on those people anyway, so I might as well go differential. And let me tell you, it nearly worked out. My total score for the weekend ended up being 245 points, and the meta team ended up scoring 286 points. So in total, I lost out 41 points to the meta team. But remember, if I were to have the meta team, I would have had to take a -20, meaning I actually lost out on it being favorable, but only 1 point, which to me is a massive success considering what could have happened, right? And I know I lost 41 points on the people who ran the meta team, but it doesn't feel as bad as it perhaps could have if someone like a Piastri would have picked up driver of the day in the end. Norris, again, didn't perform great, but like he had a lot of overtakes. It was the third highest scoring driver, only behind Hamilton and Piastri. Hadjar with a 5-pointer increase in price. Behrman, Ocon, and the Haas trio hard carried me this week. I was so happy to own them, and it's if they're gonna perform like this the entire season, they are holds for the rest of the season. At least Ocon and Behrman are. Maybe the Haas constructor has to go once I need some more points from it, but Haas constructor only lost out to Mercedes by 20 points, which is incredible. McLaren, again, 92 points, must own at this point. They are topping the points standard every single race. And the most frustrating one, actually, is Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll ended up getting 7 points. I had an option of selling Lance Stroll to Jack Doohan because Jack Doohan looked like a better, more likely asset to increase the maximum price. Doohan ended up having not that good of a race. Lance Stroll with 7 points, 1 point away from increasing 0.2 million instead of dropping 0.2 million. I know Jack Doohan was also a point away from increasing 0.6, but imagine if Lance Stroll had just gained one more position or had done one more overtake and Lance Stroll would have increased as much as Jack Doohan. I would have looked like an absolute genius. Still though, happy with Lance Stroll. I know, he could have been better, he could have been worse, but that Aston Martin looks like an absolute dustbin, and they had no opportunity climbing in that race whatsoever. I don't even think Lance had a particularly bad race or anything. So yeah, just lost out to the other option, which was, taking the -20 would have given me 1 more point. Taking Lance Stroll out for Jack Doohan would have given me a bit of budget, but also I would have lost an additional 5 points. So overall, I'm happy with the team. I'm happy with my decision that I ended up making. But the main thing always with this strategy was to have 3 transfers going into Saudi Arabia. So let's actually look at what I can do with those 3 free transfers in Saudi. So we are here on the F1 Fantasy page. Here in this team selection video, I'm just going to talk about what I'm likely to do with my team. So 3 free transfers, and some people have already messaged me talking about like Haas look really good for budget gains compared to Mercedes. You could actually consider keeping them for the long term. And I'm going to explain why I won't do that. The reason for that is Haas mainly as a budget building option works really well, especially if you're going to limitless in Miami. And that's what some people have said as well. Like, if you're going to limitless in Miami and you're not on the meta team, don't switch to the meta team. And I do agree with that. But I also heavily disagree with limitlessing in Miami. After the Saudi Grand Prix, I'm going to come out with an entirely separate video called Why You Should Not Limitless in Miami. So definitely subscribe so you don't miss that one, because I don't think it's optimal at all to limitless in Miami. But that is a long video and a long discussion, so I'm not going to go into it here. Subscribe if you want to see that video, and it should drop after the Saudi Grand Prix. But for me personally, looking at this team, 3 free transfers, I want to switch to the meta team now. And you might say, well, you went off meta last week and now you're going to the meta. Won't you just have lost out to the people who are on the meta? And the answer is yes, but also no at the same time. I did gain some budget doing this way. And overall, I think it's better to switch to the meta now, use the budget I have, and then later on try and be a bit differential, because currently I do think the meta team is going to continue being the most optimal team moving forward, right? So for that reason, my plan currently for my team is to use these 3 free transfers to switch to the meta team. Just switching Lando Norris and Haas to Piastri and Mercedes is not possible. Mercedes costs 23.9 million. I have 21.1. So I have to downgrade one of these 3 assets right here. Hadjar could not be decreased to anything but Bortoleto, and that does not give me enough budget, so that's not worth it. Behrman is the best asset currently out of the cheap assets available. Hadjar is the second best, actually. So Hadjar I don't want to, so Behrman I don't want to get rid of because he looks likely to keep rising in price. Ocon has this amazing 15-pointer now that after Saudi Arabia, he can just use that with his points in Saudi. This 1-pointer in Japan is bringing him down a bit, so he doesn't look super likely to rise. But I can see him dropping 0.2 million in Saudi and then just increase 0.2 or 0.6 million in Miami, depending on the points he scores in Saudi and in Miami. So I've no sort of reason to sell Esteban Ocon, and that only leaves Lance Stroll. And Lance Stroll is not the worst asset. I still hold by that Lance Stroll is definitely not the worst asset to buy or own this week. It's just for me to afford the meta team, Lance Stroll is the one to downgrade, because it's either Lance Stroll and Ocon, and I prefer Ocon over Lance Stroll for pretty obvious reasons. So Lance Stroll has to go, and you might be saying, oh, you should have switched to Doohan last week, you would have gotten some more budget. I don't care, okay? Because even though Doohan is an option for me to buy, I don't really want to buy Doohan. Doohan looks decent for price rises, but I can't see him getting that many races in the car. I feel like they're going to put Colapinto in there, and in that case, I feel like he's an accident waiting to happen. He's very aggressive in his driving style, and he really dropped off at the end of last race. So I think the only options I have then for my budget, once I've added Mercedes in here, I have a budget of 6.9 million. And that only leaves everything below Nico Hülkenberg. Not that I would want Nico Hülkenberg anyway, but who is below Nico Hülkenberg that I would own? It's Alonso, Doohan, or Bortoleto. And this is the choice that's probably going to be my main choice my main decision to make for the deadline stream on Saturday. Which one of these 3 do I go for? So let's talk about pros and cons with each of them. The first thing to look at between these 3 assets is the F1 Fantasy Tools budget builder page. Of course, it's always here. We end up coming back every single week, and that's going to be the case at least for the first half of the season, up until maybe the summer break is when we probably stop caring about this. For now, though, this is the page to be. And if you want the premium features of F1 Fantasy Tools, you know where to get them. Top of the description is a link to their Patreon with a code that you get 50% off the first month. Definitely snag that if you are interested. And scrolling down, we get to the tier B, the 19 million or below assets. And as you can see, Behrman and Hadjar are the top for expected points, or for the points needed to increase in price, most likely to increase in price. But as you can see here, there's a whole sea of red. And the little gag at the beginning of the video is referencing this. Budget building, as we've known it so far this season, is dead. Look at these required points for 0.6 million increases. The only way to budget build is with cheap constructors right now, and then you are losing out on points to the top guys. So this is what you have to decide on. Do you go for a Haas, Alpine, V-Carb, or Aston Martin instead of a Mercedes? that's the only way you're going to gain budget. And even then, you're only gaining like 0.3 a race, because it's not like Mercedes is not increasing in price, right? So I would say budget building as we know it is dead. Listen, budget building as we know it could be back in Miami if all of the cheap assets have really good races in Saudi Arabia, because then obviously the points needed in Miami to increase is going to be lower. But for Saudi Arabia, at least, budget building is dead. So get used to your budget not increasing as much as it has early on in the season anymore. Behrman and Hadjar look like the must-owns, right? If you don't have Behrman, you don't have Hadjar, those are the assets to buy. But the assets that I'm looking at are Doohan, Alonso, and Bortoleto, right? The three assets that I'm looking to sell Stroll for are the three assets that are third, fourth, and fifth. Ocon following them up, but I do think Ocon, again, drop in price, probably incoming in Saudi. But once that one is out, and if say he just gets between 5 and 10 points in Saudi Arabia, he's going to be really, really good in Miami. I have no intention of selling Ocon. But between Doohan, Alonso, and Bortoleto, there are pros and cons, right? Doohan looks the most likely to increase, but I actually don't think he's that much better than Fernando Alonso. The points needed for a 0.6 increase is high for both of them. I don't think either of them will reach 13 or 15 points. Both of them only need 3 points to only decrease 0.2, and for a 0.2 increase, Doohan's is at 8 and Alonso is at 9. For Doohan's risk of getting kicked out of the team and me needing to use a transfer on him later on, as well as him feeling crash prone, in my opinion, I think Alonso is the clear option between the two. If you can afford to go for Alonso, I think you should, right? Both of them, granted, don't have great scores in round 4, which is also something to look at, right? After Saudi Arabia, Doohan's 6 is going to be gone, and we're going to count his 2 as well as his result in Saudi. So because Alonso has a marginally better result in round 4, that also speaks in Alonso's favor. For Bortoleto, though, it's quite different. Bortoleto, unlikely to increase. He's probably going to decrease in price. The thing with Bortoleto is that he can't decrease in price. He's stuck at 4.5 million. And for that reason, you might want to go for him for 2 reasons. One, if you think both Alonso and Doohan are going to decrease in price, you might as well just put Bortoleto in there as a placeholder for now to hold your budget in your cost cap and not risk losing it. Bortoleto is that failsafe. On the opposite side, you have no upside with Bortoleto because I don't think he's reaching 11 points whatsoever. Granted, again, he's counting this -2, so after this 4 and whatever he scores in Saudi Arabia comes in, he might be due a price rise in Miami. Another thing with Bortoleto is because he is cheaper, that allows you to maybe upgrade something else. Not for me personally, because I'm doing Piastri, because I'm obviously doing Piastri and Piastri and Mercedes in, but maybe you want to go for something a bit different and go for a different asset. Maybe you don't have Ocon or you don't have Behrman, and maybe you have Doohan but you don't have Behrman. Going for someone like a Bortoleto would allow you to upgrade that asset. Like say you go for Bortoleto over Alonso, that would give you money to upgrade Doohan to Behrman in some cases where you have a bit of money in the bank. So I think for a lot of people, going for Bortoleto this week could actually be the ideal strategy, just for the fact that you are essentially keeping 0.2 million in your cost cap for later, and then you could always transfer Bortoleto out for someone like Alonso if Alonso has a good Saudi Arabia and he looks likely to rise in price in Miami after he's decreased in either 0.2 million in Saudi. So for me currently, Bortoleto is my driver of choice currently out of those 3 for all of that I spoke of just now, but also an additional reason. And again, we gotta go back to the budget page. We have a few assets here that are on the more expensive side. We have Lawson at 7.2 with an 11 pointer in Bahrain. Gasly at 9.4 with a 13 pointer in Bahrain. Albon with a 15 pointer. Now Albon is more expensive, mind you, but with these assets, once their bad performance in Japan is gone, they are going to be likely to increase if they had a good performance in Saudi. And if I go for Bortoleto now on 4.5 million and just commit to owning him for a while at the lowest price, then I could upgrade one of my other assets after Saudi to someone like a Gasly if Gasly looks good, right? Because Gasly right now, 13 points. I mean, he hit that this race, but he had an amazing performance. And if he can now keep that up and, you know, say he gets an 8 or a 9 pointer in Saudi, he looks really good for Miami. And I would want to get to his price. And in that case, maybe I could do Ocon to Gasly if Gasly's increased and Ocon has decreased, or whatever it is, right? So having Bortoleto in there leaves me flexible to move to the cheap asset of choice after Saudi. Maybe even doing like a Hadjar to Lawson. Say Hadjar increases another 0.6 million because he gets 6 points or whatever, and then Lawson decreases in price because he reaches 6 points and he decreases 0.2 million. With the money I've saved from going Bortoleto over Alonso, I would have enough money in the bank to upgrade Hadjar to Lawson next week if the Lawson pick looks better than Hadjar. Because right, watch Hadjar get 1 point, literally get 1 point in Saudi. He increases 0.2 million. Lawson gets a like 10 pointer, and suddenly Lawson's on an 11 and a 10 pointer going into Miami, and like Lawson is must have, and Hadjar looks likely to decrease in price again. And if I don't have enough budget to move that, I would be really frustrated because I'm sitting there with an Alonso who also underperformed. You see where I'm kind of going with this? So currently I'm more in favor of Bortoleto. Second on my list is Alonso. Third on my list is Jack Tewin. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that. So if you've made it this far into the video, one, again, like the video, but two, put in the comments the order of which you prefer these three assets. My order is Bortoleto, then Alonso, then Tewin. If you disagree, please let me know. And also, don't just put those three. Put like a comment of why you think one is better than the other. So this is probably going to be my team going into Saudi Arabia. We're switching over to the meta, and we'll see how it goes from there. More videos are arriving later in the week, so do not miss that. And then after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, we're going to have some more miscellaneous guide type videos, such as the why you should not limitless in Miami. Teasing that now so you do not miss it. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.